Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm. I'll be your host, and hopefully later we'll be joined by my good friend Doug Heagren. He is once again having tech issues, and hopefully he'll be on with us. If not, it'll just be me. So I wanted to dive right in here because I think really what we're talking about this week is AI and what its impact is going to be on the world. And I know this is an investing podcast, but this has a lot of investing implications. It's still really early on in the cycle. So for all those of you who are looking for investment, there are very few of them out there. There are a handful, but I guess the question ultimately would be is which one is going to be the leader? Now, as of right now, this OpenAI model, ChatGPT, is getting all of the fanfare, and for good reason. For those of you who have not had a chance to play with it, you should. It's going to change your opinion on technology and where things are going. To me, it was really eye-opening. I had a friend who convinced me to do this. I was a little bored, so I said, sure, I'll log in. And I subsequently lost like the next 4 days to this addiction. And I think once you start to have these little conversations with it and use it for your kind of tasks, you realize that this is really life changing, especially for those of you who are going to do a lot yourself. So I put a lot of posts out this week about ChatGPT, and for those of you who've seen them, hopefully you've enjoyed them. But this is, let me see if I can pull it up here and I could maybe even share my screen with you guys as we go. Hopefully it's been a little busy because there's way too many people on it, and it's really kind of it's really kind of weighing down the software. So let's see, here we go. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about what it is, what it does, and there are some other, it's not the only one. There's definitely some other companies and some other websites that have AI or AI-like capabilities. So as of the moment, here is a list of all the different AI software, if you will, out there. And it covers different categories. So basically, artificial intelligence is kind of the next generation of technology here, which is you basically create a software program, if you will, that can interact like a human or as if similar to intelligence. And I think there are a lot of people who are really afraid of this. You know, they're afraid of the Skynet version, you know, the Vicky from iRobot version, HAL 9000. You know, people are afraid of that future, and they should be, because it's certainly possible. And I think the one thing that we have to be mindful of is we as humans think about things in a certain way, and robots don't, or intelligence software doesn't necessarily think of things in the same way. Right? Our emotional reactions may not translate necessarily to the computer version, and yet our emotional attachments may just be what creates a Skynet version of AI, right? Because the way we think of the world is in some ways very destructive, and if we're the ones programming AI, then we potentially could be programming in the same destructive nature that that is in our brains. And I think that's really the challenge here is, are we going to have that same, are we going to be creating, is our child going to be a creation of us, and we end up getting us in a much more dangerous version? This version of ChatGPT, which let's see where it is on this chart here. I think it's in the middle, text to text. There it is, right here in the text to text. So right now, there's a few different categories of different things. So text to image, which the people who run ChatGPT, they actually have a few versions. If you go on their website, they actually have this thing called DALL-E, which is amazing and not very good at the same time. It will take a description of something that you want, and it will create an image. And they're not all great. Some of them are downright terrible. But the fact is creating some pictures that aren't all that bad. just for the fact that you're giving a description. And I think the ultimate question is this actually thinking and coming up with this, or is this just pulling from the internet? Right. And if you're just pulling from the internet, I would be scared of what artificial intelligence will be, because the internet is a dumpster fire where everybody, drops their hate. There's obviously good stuff there too, but it's it's not the best place to be learning about human beings, or maybe it is. But the fact is if it's getting its information there, then you have to question about, what is the quality of this information. So, for instance, on DALL-E, it's pulling out images of great artists and then objects and pictures people upload, and it's using that as its knowledge base to create new images. Now, I couldn't say as to whether it's pulling images from somewhere else and recreating them a little bit or not. Art is not my expertise, but I could tell you that it's pretty amazing that it's kind of pulling. You could just say, Shiba Inu sitting on a hamburger bun in outer space, playing cards or something like that, something weird that probably no one's ever thought of, and it'll create that for you. So I have to imagine that there's a good amount of creativity that's going in there. But I have spent a lot of time. There's a few others. Sorry, I keep going back and forth. There's text to video. There's text to audio, text to text, text to motion, text to code, text to NFT, text to 3D, audio to text, audio, and brain to text. So there's a lot of innovation going on in these different areas. And of course, you got Elon Musk's Neuralink, which I think scares the pants out of a lot of people. But I think at the same point, that's kind of the direction where you start talking about the singularity and where humans and machines meet and what that ends up looking like. And I think that to me would be fascinating. If you haven't read Ray Kurzweil's books, you should. He has great insight into the direction of where things are going, and he's a visionary in that space. So worthwhile read if you can. But I do want to spend most of this time talking about ChatGPT, because this is the space. Sorry, I probably should have shown this earlier. This is the list of the companies, and if you look, there's quite a few companies out there. If you look at things like text to chat, which is this area, here's ChatGPT. If Copy AI has been out for a while. Jasper has been out there. There's quite a few that are out there, and the question is, how good are they? Now, the earlier versions are not as good, obviously, but as you start to expand, they're going to get exponentially better. So, for instance, the third version of ChatGPT, my understanding is it's, let's say, I think 100 million. I think it was like 100 million connections, or however they identify it. Connections, and then the next version 4 would be 100 trillion. So you have an exponential growth of capabilities of what these things are going to be able to do. So let me give you some examples here, because I think this is going to help stimulate some of the conversation. So let me kind of close this up, and I'm going to share a new screen with you all. Okay, so here is ChatGPT. So once you log in, I had a great video of getting started in ChatGPT. So if you haven't done it, please look at the video. I tried to make it a little bit humorous because it's quite simple, but I think it's something that you probably should understand a little bit. Now, I was hopeful Doug was going to join us, because he had a lot of things to say about the singularity, but hopefully he can join us here. I'm still struggling. All right, so here's ChatGPT. So once you sign on, this is what you see. That's it. This is all you get. So and here's a message bar at the bottom. There is absolutely no direction other than what you see here. So I started playing around with it. I started to use some of these prompts here, and I said, I think I used explain the theory of relativity in simple terms in Pig Latin, and it did that. Simple terms in Pig Latin. Okay, well, It did before. It must have. They just had an upgrade yesterday, but I'll show you on LinkedIn. I have a post that I put out that it actually did this. So I think in the upgrades they've changed a few things, unfortunately, but basically it's very good at explaining. I can't believe it didn't do Pig Latin anymore. It's very good at explaining things that you need. So let's just say you're writing a term paper, or let's say you're researching something, or something's on the news and you don't understand what it is. You can just say, "All right, I don't understand this. Please explain it to me in simple terms or in another language." I think it'll do it. Translate in French. So now it's writing it in French. So you can make very quick prompts and requests, and this thing is going to do it for you. And you look at the time it's taking to do this. It's taking very little time to actually do what I'm requesting of it. Granted, it's writing it out slowly. That may be more of a capacity issue on their side to make sure that people don't put together lightning requests. Maybe it slows it down. But the point is this is putting it together pretty quickly. So that's just kind of like a simple request that you can put in. And you can use. There are certain industries that are going to get impacted by this significantly, and they've already started seeing this impact. So some of the industries, I'll tell you kind of what it can do, what it can't do, and then probably what it will do. So let's start there. So here's what it can do. It can write a blog post for you on just about any topic that you can think of. It can explain complex topics in simple terms. It can write your term paper for you. It can write short stories. It can translate into different languages, as we've seen, including Pig Latin, which I'll have to see. And actually, this is something you should be mindful of. How you prompt it is really important. So if you just say, write me a blog post on finance, it's going to be very much to the T, okay, the word finance, and it's going to write a blog post on that. So what you want to do is you want to have a lot of descriptive prompts. So you want to say, like, it has to be 500 words, and here is the keyword, and here is the tone I want it in. Here's the outline. Like, the more specific you are, the better quality of output you're going to get. And I'm going to show you a little bit about this. It unfortunately cleared my conversations from earlier with this upgrade, so I'll have to pull them out on LinkedIn later. But just understand that the prompts that you give it are really important because it's not that smart. So I'll show you some ways to manage this and that you can use it better, but I want to at least go through this at a high level. So it can prepare virtual assistant responses to customers. It can write social media posts. It can write ad campaigns. It can make a logo if you're using like something like DALL-E. Actually, there's another one that you can make a logo in, which is, let's see if I can pull it up. I think it's called Logo Design. Looka, I think is what it's called. So Looka is a site where it will create a logo for you. So there's a few different sites, and I'll give you those sites as well. So anyway, so ad campaigns, make a logo. You can touch up your resume. So you can put a resume in here. I could just cut and paste and put it in there, and it will give you criteria. Or I'm sorry, it will critique it. It can create music. Not this, but there are other AI apps that do create and edit music, which are kind of cool. It can edit just about anything, including computer code. So if you have computer code, let's say you're a coder and you're having a challenge with a certain part of the code, you can put the code in there and it will debug it for you. Believe it or not, that's a little scary, but it can do that. It can touch that up. It can critique and simplify the code, as we said, and it can edit writing. So those are a lot of the basic stuff it can do. Now, I've tried to integrate this into my life in every which way possible just to test it. So when it comes to marketing, we'll get into that because that's a deep rabbit hole. If it applies to writing, if it let's say I need to write an email to my kid's principal or teacher, I can just say, hey, write an apologetic email to my kid's teacher with a condolence tone, or you could be really descriptive and it'll just write it out within 5 seconds. It's been really helpful in a lot of ways. So sometimes I've been stuck writing certain content and I just put it in there and say, here's what I'm trying to do, and it'll spit it out. Now, there's something to keep in mind. So we just talked about what it can do. Here's what it can't do. It can't give you the best version you've ever seen. Let me explain that. Those of you who are familiar with the 80-20 rule, this 80-20 rule applies here. What you get is going to be 80% as good as what you would create yourself. You should be mindful of that. Everything you get is at best 80%. Now, I've been thinking a lot about why that is, and I think a lot of it, especially with one category that I'll talk about in a minute, is it doesn't have personality. So you can give it a tone, you can give it a style. Like if you're on DALL-E and you're looking for a certain picture, you can say you want it as a photograph style. You could say it in the style of Van Gogh or Renoir, or you could pick an artist that it might know and say, I want to do it in that style. You can do a whole lot of things with this. So I could say I want to write a paper in with the tone of Donald Trump, as an example, which I know is going to fire people up and people get all pissed off. But anyway, so you could say, I want to write, a 500-word speech talking about inflation in the tone and style of Donald Trump, and it'll do that, or Joe Biden, or Obama, or whatever you want to be. You could do that, and it will spit it out. So in that way, it's quite amazing. Will it be as good as something you would hear from those people? Probably not, but it'll be good enough that you can take that basic 80% and you can tweak it in your own way and you can make it really good. So ordinarily, for instance, it would take me maybe a day, like 8 hours, let's say, to write and edit an article or a blog post and do it really well. And I'm talking like, 1,500, 2,000 word blog post, not just like a short one. So it takes me a long time. I'm very deliberate. So I wrote a blog post in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. And that is going to be the topic of one of my posts on LinkedIn next week. Is I'm going to show you what I did, how I did it. And it's quite solid. It is a solid blog post. Would I put it on my site? No. And I'll explain why. It follows the 80-20 rule. So, I asked it, I put together all the different steps that I go through when I do research and put together a post. It did it all for me. And then it wrote it for me. Now, when I read it, I say, all right, this is solid. Do I want to read it? No. Why? Because it doesn't have my voice. It doesn't have my personality, my tone. And so in that way, it's very lacking. Would you really want to read an article written by a robot? And it's factually correct. Maybe it's like a textbook. I never like reading textbooks. Why? Because there's no story, there's no emotion. There's nothing causing me to say I want to keep reading this. It's just more like, I have to learn this. This is interesting, but it's so dry. That's very much like what you would get from ChatGPT. So if it's going to take you a day to write something and you can shave a day off in 5 minutes and then you can look at it and you can edit it, that is a worthwhile savings of time. So while it's not going to give you necessarily a finished product on really anything I've tried with it, it will give you enough so that it's going to save you a ton of time. And we have magic here. It looks like the robots have blessed us, and Doug is joining us. Doug, are you there?
I am here, Kirk. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Doug. Are you doing this on your daughter's flip phone, or how did you get in?
Well, thank God for tech support, and don't ask me how I finally got in, but we finally got in, and I think if we're talking about artificial intelligence today, it just goes to tell you we've got some time before technology is ever going to be reliable enough to totally control everything. So we've got time to prepare for before the Terminators come.
Good. Well, I'm going to finish up on my high-level thoughts, and I'll let you talk a little bit because I'm flailing around, Doug. I was prepared for a conversation, not a monologue.
That's all right. Let me get a background here. Go ahead.
All right. So getting back to this. All right. So we told you what it can do. Here's what it can't do. It can't see the future. It can't discuss politics, or i.e., it won't discuss politics. You can try. I haven't been successful in making it come up with anything. It cannot compare teams, sports teams. It won't do profanity. It won't do explicit topics. It won't find people. It won't give financial advice, legal advice. It can't tell jokes very well. it can't truly understand concepts, which I'll explain a little bit. So I want to talk about a few different things, and then I'll let Doug give his 2 cents here too. So it won't give financial advice. It disclaimers everything. And I think that's by design. I can't explain why. I can't say if it's because they don't want to cannibalize the industry. I don't know if it's because they don't want to get in trouble. Either way, it's not going to give you financial advice, but it will give you guidance in many ways. So it's very valuable. I have had it give me some responses that have been valuable. I have asked it for tax advice and legal advice, and it gives me enough to be dangerous, but not enough to defend myself in court. So something to understand. But here's a big topic, and I want to these two, the last two, tell jokes and truly understand top concepts. Jokes are, I've learned a lot about jokes in the last week in that I'm an amateur humorist in that I enjoy humor and I enjoy learning about it and other people's humor and just doing it and providing it. And what I've learned by prompting this software for humor is it's really not good at it. It understands the basic concepts of humor. And this is where it gets 80% there. The jokes are solid in the sense that, okay, I see that it's a joke. Does it ever going to make you laugh? Absolutely not. Now, I've tested the limits of this, and I just said, hey, give me 5 jokes. Give me 5 jokes. Give me 5 more. Give me 5 more. I'll keep asking it. At some point, it runs out of jokes. So this is where I think the system is pulling from the internet as opposed to thinking. And this is a really important point because this is where a lot of people argue, is this really a thinking machine or is this a regurgitating machine? Google's a regurgitating machine, right? It's not a thinking machine. Once we have a thinking machine, that's going to change the world. In many ways, this is starting to change the world. But conceptually, if you're trying to tell a joke and it's pulling it from somewhere, it doesn't understand jokes. Now, it does understand, it is better at riddles. So riddles is much better at. However, I don't think it understands the riddle. So I asked it a riddle. It gave me 3 really solid riddles that I hadn't heard before. So kudos to Vicky for doing that. But I asked it, like, I gave it the riddle of the Sphinx, right? What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, 3 legs in the evening? Well, the answer is man. But it went on to explain the riddle, which, by the way, if you have to explain a joke, you don't get the joke. So I think that in itself should tell you what you need to know. But it went on to explain the joke, and it was weird. It said, well, in the morning, a baby is lying on its back, and then it's walking, and it said something along the lines of it's walking on 4 legs on its back. I was like, I don't think you understand how babies work, right? That's just not. And then in the evening, it was supposed to be a cane, right? 3 legs. Said, well, in the evening, it's pushing around a chair. Well, to me, that sounds like 6 legs. But, so I'm not sure if it's fully understanding conceptually. I think it's more of like a regurgitation of something they learned somewhere else, which I think is how it learns. And I'd be curious if people want to comment on this of what you know. We're definitely taking comments. We're definitely getting lots of spam from people waving hi, but we're not getting a lot of comments. We got 1 or 2. So if you want to comment on this, please do, because I'd love to communicate with people about this on the show. So anyway, that's my 2 cents of what it can't do. So it's 80% there. Jokes are off limits. There are certain limitations that's put on it. Profanity and inappropriate behavior is one, which I don't know why anyone wants to play with this thing if you can't do inappropriate behavior or profanity, but hey, teach their own. So Doug, what about you? I got one more topic I want to hit, but I want to hit you first because you've been sitting there in silence for the last 20 minutes.
Well, I don't know if I've been silent the last 20 minutes, but I've been sitting in silence since I was able to get on a couple minutes ago. No, it's where do I begin with this? Artificial intelligence is interesting. It's no question that we're heading in a direction of it being a real thing. And I don't know. I want to back it up a little bit because if you think about if a lot of people don't know the origins of this, and so there's a gentleman that was named Ray Kurzweil, who has been around a long time, and he's been you can kind of call him the godfather of artificial intelligence. And back in 1965, he appeared on a game show as a guest called I've Got a Secret. And actually, Steve Allen was the host. Many people know who Steve Allen was. He played a short musical composition on a piano. And the idea was that Kurzweil would be hiding an unusual fact, and the panelists had, which included a former Miss America, had to guess what it was. And so what he did is he demonstrated that the computer, which he built himself, would be able to move on and play this thing. And basically what he did is he worked out a way. The secret was, and nobody guessed it, maybe not even him, but basically that he was able to get this, this system that hooked up like a typewriter to start playing this music. Okay. And they were guessing. I mean, people were more impressed by his age than really what he came up with. But here, 46 years later, he's really kind of approached this thing that technology was going to take over, and that it was going to become more intelligent than humans. And there's a lot of people who believe in this, that this is coming true, that we're basically going to have what's called an age of singularity that's going to occur. And the original prediction was, and Time Magazine wrote this article about this in 2011, the year that man becomes immortal. Well, we talk, Kirk, about how technology has really kind of compounded on itself, right? How much faster processing has gotten just since 2000. And now they're saying that they believe that this reality, this world in which the computers become more intelligent, more autonomous than man, might be 10 years ahead. So now they're thinking that this is a possibility as early as 2035. And I'm, regardless of what you think about it, the pros, cons, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to appreciate it. There's a lot of reasons to potentially fear it. I mean, most people who have listened to this have ever seen have seen the movie The Terminator, or The Matrix, or things like that. But where if you look at where it's gotten just in the last 5 years, I mean, if you talk about, on social media, bots, and the ability for these things to respond to real questions, and the confusion that people now run into, is this a real human, or is this an artificial computer that's responding to me? You talk about humor. Well, and again, artificial intelligence, at least at this point, is a technology where it is whatever you put into it, it's trying to process what you have, what it's been given. And ultimately, it's still up to humans to outthink that. A couple of years ago, I think 911 service, I forget which town it was, it failed because humans had figured that there would become a point that, had to put in a limiter into this, okay? Because the system was now automated, 911. And they put in a limiter of, I think it was 1 million calls. Well, guess what? They never thought that we'd get to a point in which there would be 1 million calls on 911, and it hit 1 million calls on 911, and the whole system crashed because all of a sudden there was more calls than humans had ever anticipated. So one of the challenges I think that's going to be a real issue is that, yes, the technology of artificial intelligence may outpace humans in terms of its intelligence. But the question is, can humans be able to keep up with the limiting factors that it needs to know as to where the parameters have to be built around it? And it's because ultimately we're still designing this, right? And the question, is at some point, is artificial intelligence going to be able to design itself? Well, if it's designing itself only based on the limiting factors that it's able to determine, well, that's where the whole story of the Terminator came from. It got to a point where it realized, or I was either that or the Matrix, it realized, hey, we're at a point now in which we see that we've done all the data and all the calculations, and we've realized that the one thing that's corrupting the Earth is humans, right? So, but we're definitely ahead of schedule on this, Kirk. And there's so many different ways to go on this, because I mean, you look at, and I think you've got a graphic about all the different technologies that you can use to help with efficiency in work. I mean, now, when I'm doing recordings now, I use a system called Fathom. There's another one called Firefly. It's automatically transcribing the communications that we have into notes, into transcription. I get automatic responses after it from artificial intelligence people on the end saying, hey, we've analyzed your communication, and here's some thoughts. it's very, very fascinating. I think that it's going to certainly, just like anything, the automation is going to make some interesting outlooks and predictions for what that's going to do to jobs and careers and what you need to learn in college. We've already seen STEM becoming a bigger factor in, or a bigger focus of education. I mean, Kirk, I know I'm catching on here from your original monologue, but I mean, this is a topic I could talk about indefinitely.
Well, let's get your opinion, because I was talking about it. I actually wanted to hit one more area, and then we can just kind of just riff a little bit. And actually, one quick thought that kind of comes to me as you were talking about some kind of deeper thoughts about this. So, as I understand ChatGPT, it's pulling from a lot of sources of data, primarily the internet. But the software designers, they I guess they have what they call trainers, which is they look at the response and then they train it to respond in different ways. And I don't know how that's all set up. I don't have a behind the scenes look into this. But here's a thought. So we talked about earlier in the show, one of the big fears is that AI is going to pull from humans. Well, humans are flawed. Like, we're a flawed creature, right? So if it's pulling from us, it's going to be flawed as well. And unfortunately, it may have our flaws, because it's learning from our flaws and saying, well, this is the right way to do it. Well, maybe that's appropriate if it wants to blend in society and have the same challenges that humans have. However, that also may present problems. You get that gets into the iRobot or the Terminator kind of outcome, which is it sees us as the problem, because it says, well, if we're destroying each other and it's mimicking us, then it's going to destroy us. I could see how that could be a problem, right? Because it's learning our bad behaviors. However, we can't assume that, because it's a computer and it has different boundaries and different rules. But if I think about it this way, so right now AI is pulling from us. What if AI starts pulling from itself, right? So let's say AI starts creating a lot of articles and blog posts, and that's what goes up, and that people don't write anymore because AI is doing it. And then what if it starts pulling from itself? Where does that lead? What road does that lead down? I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Or think about something like artists. AI creates art, but it's based off other artists, other designs, it's not just like throwing paint at a wall. It's looking at what other things are successful and what works, and it's creating based on that. And so what if there's an alive artist right now? Let's say Doug's an artist, and I say, hey, create me a picture of a football player, by Doug Heagren. And it creates that. And it looks just like one of your works, Doug. And all of a sudden, now you got to wonder, is this a Doug original or not? And how do you verify that? And what if it takes Doug's paintings and alters it a little bit and makes it its own? And I know there's I'm not an expert on this. I know there's probably rules and laws to define this, but it's an interesting thought of where is the line going to be drawn when this new AI in like literally in under a minute will recreate some art in whatever way, shape, or form I want. And now does that devalue what Doug is doing as an artist? And do we even care about Doug anymore? Because AI is going to give us exactly what we want, not just Doug's thoughts, but like, hey, I feel like dark today. Create me a dark piece of art that looks like A, B, C, and D. And now I've got this artwork, and who needs artists anymore, because the AI is doing it for you. So it raises a lot of philosophical questions of what's the future going to look like? What areas are going to be created or destroyed? And that gets into my third topic, which I'll just mention quickly, and we'll get back to Doug. This is a public service announcement. Hi, my name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'm with the government, and I'm here to help. Doesn't that sound reassuring? Well, let's talk about how they're helping. The government needs your help to make our money worthless again. PPP loans, student loan forgiveness, helicopter money. Let's keep the party going until our money is totally worthless. Don't think it can happen? Sure it can. Just ask Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Greece, Germany, Hungary, Greece, Yugoslavia. Did I say Greece? As a loyal listener to their show, I want to give you free money. I'm giving away free money in one of these hyperinflationary currencies. Go to www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money and follow the instructions to get your free gift. I have a large audience and only a limited supply of these currencies. I'm not the Federal Reserve, so I will run out at some point. Make sure you get yours before I run out. Go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money. Follow the instructions and get your free money today. So the last topic I want to get into is what will it do? What will it end up doing? So it will end up destroying industries, and not all right away. It's only 80% good. And so the people who are not embracing it right now in those industries are going to get run over. So if you're in the marketing industry, you're going to get run over really quick unless you embrace this and you start to utilize it in this shape or fashion. At some point, marketers are going to be a thing of the past. And I don't mean, everybody, but I mean, in general, there's going to be a lot less work for marketers because you're going to be able to do it really easy, especially small businesses will be able to take this technology and do everything you can. Like I mentioned earlier, in 5 minutes, I created an SEO ready blog post on any topic of my choosing in 5 minutes. Well, it's 80% as good. When it gets 100% as good, why do I need someone else to do it? I can get it in any voice I want. I can get it in any format I want. I don't have to pay somebody. I can just have this thing do it for me. So that it's going to destroy a lot of industries. And why do I need a copywriter? There's already AI out there that writes good copy. This ChatGPT writes okay copy. I mean, I know how to write good copy, and it's decent. It's not great, but I can tweak it in 5 seconds and make it look good. So I think it's going to change that really quickly. When we talk about writing, any sort of writers, it's going to change that quite a bit. As soon as it gets that last 20%, you don't need reporters anymore. You just put in a story and this thing will write itself, unfortunately. Maybe that's better. I don't know. But writing emails, customer service people, chat bots, customer service is a big one. So think about customer service. There was a day I could call, when we have Comcast because we have no choice here in Massachusetts. You're forced to have a provider. So I'm just going to make a comment about Comcast and hopefully they don't sue me. Comcast is a monopoly. So naturally, they have terrible customer service. And I would fathom a guess that they deliberately have terrible customer service so you don't call in and bother them. They've deliberately made a maze so you can't get through. And if it's not deliberate, then I would be very, very scared because it is a complete train wreck dumpster fire. But anyway, so when I call in, it used to be able to get somebody on the phone. They're nice people. They do a good job, but you can never take like 20 minutes to get on somebody on the phone. Now, you can't get somebody on the phone in the US. They're in another country. They don't speak the language. They're reading off a script. If you go off script, they don't know how to handle it. Give me your supervisor. I don't have a supervisor. Sure you do. What are you, operating in a phone booth? Of course you have a supervisor. But they have a script, and their script doesn't allow them to be people. So why do you need to pay these people? Just hire a chat bot that's going to give you a script by itself. So there's a lot of areas where this is going to just take over that. And I think if you own a customer service company, you probably should sell it because in a few years they won't need you. Let's see the last one. And certainly in where is it? I think those are the main ones. I mean, there's definitely some more, but programmers. Programmers are going to hate me. And I will tell you that programmers, it's an art, not a science. Really good programming is about simplicity and design. And good programmers are like gold. So don't kick the messenger here. But this thing can debug code now. Wait until it can start creating and debugging code, and the whole world's going to change. It does complex math. It does short stories. So there's a lot of things it can do. And because this thing doesn't give you an instruction manual, people are going to play with it and come up with new uses. So I wouldn't be surprised if people come up with a lot of new great uses for this. But right now, it will do pretty much any task that requires any sort of thinking and somebody else has the information somewhere. So Doug, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I'd like to touch on the last thing you're talking about, programming. And this is going to sound like one of those okay boomer moments, but I grew up in the IT world. My family, father owned a company that did consulting for IT for companies. And so he had a lot of systems programmers and kind of modern day kind of development programmers. This was years ago. But the original the original computers were, were paper punch cards, right? So, they were massive. They took up the size of a house. As they got smaller, then they got but it got more powerful. They created the mainframes, and the mainframes, but really, I mean, there are still many of your old school major companies are still being run at the core off of the old IBM mainframes. Now, these mainframes originally had a limited memory space, right? I mean, I forget exactly how little memory it took to get to get NASA, to get the astronauts to the moon. Back in the day, because storage was so expensive, these coders had no room for error. They had to be very, very efficient and effective with the coding that they did. Well, as the world of the PC came out and storage space became, much less expensive, and it has continued to get less expensive. Now, I mean, I have a 2 terabyte, SSD drive that I could plug in 2 terabytes. And I think it cost me like $150, maybe $200 for this. Well, back in the day, that was a luxury to get space. So when we started to get more space on computers, coders it's kind of like income creep. We talk about it. You make more income, you start spending more. You don't even notice. Well, guess what? As we got more storage, you could build more code and you could write more what we call bloatware, right? So, now you look at how much space the operating system takes up on a regular computer. Well, guess what? I mean, yes, space is becoming cheaper, but we are now to the point where space is still so big that data centers are an industry. I mean, they've got entire buildings built just for the storage of data. Guess what? What if artificial intelligence could go through and cut out all of that? Because that's what they would call it. They refer to it as sloppy coding. If you had a problem with the code, you just write a patch and build coding around it. You wouldn't actually go back and rewrite the code to make it more efficient. Well, that takes up space. If, artificial intelligence can go through there and look at coding and say, you know what, the fastest and most effective and efficient way to write this is point A to point B with minimal space, minimal storage. Imagine what that does now overall when we have to the ability to create more and more technology and data being written in the space that we already have as space continues to expand even greater. I mean, I can totally see where, again, humans are inefficient. It's a trial and error thing. Software, as you say, is an art. They go in and they start to design this, but it doesn't work. You just write more code, boom, done. The whole projects can take months, years to develop this stuff. Artificial intelligence might be able to design this and develop this from years down to months, down to days. And you know what? Guess what the number one cost of any company is, Kirk? Well, one of those number one costs is technology, and a lot of that is paying very expensive wages to people to analyze your IT. So, I mean, that's going to be, if that's going to be an area of potentially massive change. You talk about the, benefits of artificial intelligence. I mean, there's lots of them. You can get, complex problems solved, improve education worldwide. You can bring about automation, help make smarter, faster decisions, minimize human errors, help with research and, and data. I mean, when my daughter needs to do a paper now, the amount of information that's out there. You talk about customer experience. I hate to say, and they, one of the things they're saying for artificial intelligence is that it can enhance customer experience. Well, if the customer experience using a human now is as bad as you just described, yeah, why not take away and go back to where there's at least a personal connection? Language barrier is an issue, right? It is one of the biggest complaints with customer service. You bring that back to where the artificial intelligence sounds like it's from the same area as the client. Guess what? They're going to relate to it better. They're probably going to complain less. I mean, ultimately, if it can't get you to the manager, well, neither could the human. So what's changed there? Advances in field of medicine, improved criminal justice system, preserving the environment. These are lots of different benefits that can come from, come from artificial intelligence. But let's not think that there aren't some cons that could come from that as well. What are some, music, by the way, you talked about music. Well, if artificial intelligence is listening to what's out there and it's designing new music, you could eliminate opportunities for artists to be able to put out new music. The music becomes more homogenous because it might be harder for it to get to the screen where everybody can, where everybody can potentially, or get to the stream where everybody can see it. I mean, Spotify uses art.
Oh, I think we lost Doug there for a minute. Doug's having all sorts of problems. Hopefully we can get him back here. While we're waiting on Doug, I did want to address we had some listener questions here, and I wanted to address certainly one of them. Somebody had asked that they heard somewhere that teachers want schools to ban it so students can't cheat on essays. This is where we get into this topic of, I don't know if it's an ethical topic or not, but it's an open question. So the open question is, should we be allowed to use this technology, or should we require people to do it themselves? Now, I'm going to compare this to when I was growing up, calculators. So when I was growing up, when I was a young kid in school, calculators were cheating. You can't use a calculator. That's cheating because you have to learn how to do it yourself. Now, I don't know how many people know how to do things themselves. They just put numbers in a calculator and spits out a number. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but, things have evolved where we no longer have calculators. Everything's a calculator. Your phone's a calculator. Your computer's a calculator. Everything's a calculator. So it's like, how is this integrated? Sorry, Doug says he's got a power outage. So it looks like he probably won't be joining us. So apologies for those who came for Doug. We'll get him on next week. But you think about the calculators. We don't use calculators anymore because they're just part of us. And there are classes where they require you to have one, like a TI-81 or TI-83. I forget which one it was, but they require you to have a financial calculator because it'll take you 2 seconds to do a calculation that it would take you like half an hour to do. So, save yourself some time. And now it makes everybody more efficient. Now, of course, you might not know how to do the calculation anymore, which is a problem in itself, right? And this is always the problem. Let's say we have is that Doug? I think Doug's joined. Maybe. If we have something that shorts out all the technology, well, now we've got a bit of a problem. So ideally, we want people to learn the skills, but I can see why schools want to ban it. There was actually a school that banned it on campus. So the teachers, so what they did was the school banned openai.com. So you could not access the website on campus. Now, students are enterprising young creatures, and they would just go to a coffee shop off campus. I mean, to me, that's just, that's kind of a silly thing. But they put their foot down. They said, we're not going to allow this. And okay, I don't mind if you want to make a stand. That's where you're making your stand. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, frankly. I think it's just, you got to make a stand. That's where it is. I will say this. This came out in November. I think it was November 22nd. I think is the day this went live. And December break, a Princeton student had created an app that can determine whether written content was written by AI or a human. So it only took a month for some new enterprising young student to create an app to determine whether it was actually created by AI or not. It's not going to take long for these teachers or professors to say, oh, that was written by AI. The question is, does it matter? And, and I don't know the answer to that, right? Because if we're going to be effectively using all this in the future, maybe it just means we think differently. So instead of me thinking, all right, how do I have to lay this out? And I just say, hey, give me an outline for inflation. And it spits out an outline. I'm like, oh, great. That's a great outline. I'm going to go with that. So I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. But these are really important questions that we all ask ourselves is, do I want to continue learning this, or do I want to learn the new way and adapt to it so that I'm not sitting here running long division on paper? I can just plug it in a calculator and it'll save me some time. So that's the open question I think we have to ask. And just like, Andrew asked with the, he also asked if it can be used to identify, to build into it for other art and creating other things. I think it's going to create some fascinating stuff. Now, really quickly, music has a formula to it. It's got a more or less an algorithm to it, if you will. And good music has a form, it's got structure, it's got math behind it. And a lot of people will say, yeah, you can. I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm fairly confident from people I've talked to that the music industry is already doing this. There's a formula, which is why all these songs come out as hits. And they keep following the formula. Does that mean that we're going to come out with new and interesting stuff? Well, probably a lot less of it because people are going with what's going at the moment. Now, are they going to come out with some new interesting like hard rock or alternative? Maybe, I don't know. But it's just something to keep in mind. Like, where is this going? And are we giving up a part of ourselves to this thing? And are we losing ourselves? Should we lose ourselves? And, are these new things better? Or is the human experience and the emotion and the, really the emotion, right? Like if you think about artists, painters, there's so much emotion just driven into that canvas that I don't know if machines at the moment can't experience emotion. So maybe they won't, maybe they will in the future. I don't know. I don't know where the future holds for emotion in machines, but that emotion is what drives some of the greatness that we have as human beings. So it's an open question. So Doug, I know you got cut off by a power outage, but I'll let you kind of continue.
I don't know where my thoughts are today. I will say that when you're talking about music, I think one of the things that they're saying that could be a positive on the music side is that, and I was going down that road of kind of the homogenization of music, because obviously it can, now artificial intelligence can just take, and I mean, so much music is now electronically derived anyway. I mean, if you look at the numbers of Fender guitar sales and Gibson guitar sales, they've really plummeted. I don't know if they've started coming back, but there was definitely a downtrend because less and less kids are, people are going into music and actually playing instruments. But one thing that is an advantage is it is really difficult to discover new music, right? There's a funny meme that the lady that ran the lead singer of the Eurythmics, escaping me for a second here. Oh gosh, well, Kirk, what was her name? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
Oh geez. All right. Well, anyway, it's trying to fly on the spot. So Annie Lennox. So Annie Lennox shows how she got this letter one time, basically saying, "Hey, I've discovered you. I think you might have there might be an opportunity for you in music. Please reach out to us." It's like, oh, and she shared it because obviously she's a legend in music. And she said, it's funny because, she's like, maybe I'll have a chance to become a star. But she says the reality is that lots of people in music get scammed by this thing, by this type of stuff all the time. Well, the reality is, and so people get desperate, right? They've got music, they want to become successful, they want to be recognized. How do they get discovered? Well, they see this and they think, wow, I'm going to do this, get an opportunity, and then they end up paying all this money and it goes nowhere. But indie artists have an opportunity with artificial intelligence. Spotify has 20,000 new songs every day. How do they stand out, or how do record labels find them? Well, guess what? Artificial intelligence can comb through social media, YouTube, TikTok. I mean, this is how Justin Bieber got discovered, he put his own music out on social media. Well, now artificial intelligence can take the replacement of the inefficiency of humans and actually maybe find and create short lists of stars, and actually help them to now become into the rotation, because they might be able to identify early how quickly there are trends that are showing these artists are being followed, and actually put them into rotation. But again, I'm going to summarize this too. There's some major failures that have happened. I mean, Amazon had recruiting software, when they started to try to use artificial intelligence, ended up creating bias, and actually started to favor men over women, and hire and actually offer more salary to men, because it used data that showed men were paid more, men were more successful. Was this accurate? Absolutely not. But again, it's the information the artificial intelligence could gather to make its assumptions. Microsoft infamously had the Tay chatbot that went out there, and because of Twitter, it rapidly, within a couple of days, had to be shut down because it started to do all sorts of racist and bigoted comments, because again, the information it was taking based on what humans were putting in. Uber, self-driving cars, caused a fatality. How does artificial intelligence make complex decision making? Again, do you take the car through the crowd of people, or do you to avoid hitting one person, or do you take the car through the one person to avoid hitting the crowd of people? This is an area where artificial intelligence can really struggle. IBM Watson was used. They tried to use it for oncology, and it started misdiagnosing cases. And of course, that led to a $65 million failed project. So, there's a lot of information and a lot of development that has to happen here. You go back to the disruption of jobs. We don't have time to get into this today. It's probably a conversation for another time, but there's a lot of people that think that there may become a point in which there will be an inability for so many humans to do jobs that they will not be able to be gainfully employed. That brings up the conversation of universal wage. Very controversial, because now you're talking about actually having to pay people just to sustain their life because they can't actually do a job, right? There's nothing available for them because technology has really eliminated, more jobs than there are people. Okay. And so now what do you do? So, I think it's here. It's here to stay. I think we're going to come, if 2045 was the day of singularity, I recommend people go look up the Time article on Kurzweil and the day of singularity in 2045. They now think we're 10 years ahead of that, which means now we're looking at 2035 as a possibility. And if you look at just how it's being used right now, and you just look back 5 years, Kirk, it really wasn't there 5 years ago. So look how much is developed in 5 years and ask yourself, in the next 12 to 13, could we hit that? I think it's quite possible. I think we're already ahead of schedule.
Yeah, these are all interesting questions and thoughts, and that's why we wanted to address it on the show. I think there's a lot of open questions right now in terms of where things are going. I think the ChatGPT is a great first step for people to get introduced to this new technology. Granted, there were others where they were kind of like script writers or marketing copy writers, and that's all great. But this is something a little different, where it's kind of like you're having a conversation with it. And I've had some fun with it, and I will tell you that for those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, you're going to enjoy some of my posts this week and the following weeks, because I've had a lot of fun with it. So I'm going to try to make them humorous. But and if you are following me on LinkedIn, you'll see them. But I think it opens up the realm of possibilities. I look at this as like this: if you need structure, if you need to be told what to do, if you need very siloed thinking, you're going to struggle with this. It is a choose your own adventure application. You do whatever you want to do with it. And if you want that to be, one way, you do it one way, you whatever you want to do. That's what it's there for. It's not like I'm going to create a logo and this is all the site does. This site does a lot of stuff. So if you go there and you need structure, you're going to struggle because there's no instructions. Now, granted, you can go to certain websites and you can get hints, but generally speaking, it's not going to guide you. Now, if you're interested in open-ended adventure, if you're adventurous, if you're creative, creative people are going to love this, because you can just go in and just start creating random stuff with it. And this is what I've been doing for like the last week. Is I've spent like a whole weekend asking it questions, having conversations with it, testing the boundaries, seeing what it'll let me do, not let me do. Like I said, I created a pretty solid blog post in 5 minutes or less. And I mean, the fact that I could do that, it's not going to stop somebody who's a lot smarter than me from doing it in less and maybe even creating a better one. I do think that they are starting to put parameters on it to fence it in, because I think it's getting a little too free with its thoughts. And, I asked it to do a handful of things the other day related to my job, and it provided it. And then the new upgrade, it won't do it anymore. So I think it was interesting. I think it's kind of learning what not to do, which I would think that, in some ways, I think of my profession and Doug's profession, you think of like CPAs, you think of attorneys. Attorneys are going to struggle. If you're not a trial attorney, you're going to struggle. If you're doing contract law, this can do contract law. all it's going to do is pull from other contracts and come up with something. So I think attorneys are going to have a hard time in the subsequent years coming up and providing value to their clients if they're just doing contracts. If you do it, it's not going to be fighting a court case for you. Although I heard a news story that they were going to have some AI is going to judge a court, going to fight a court case. I don't know what that was about, but anyway, it could have been just could have been just spam. But either way, there's a lot of things that's going to change in the service professional realm. But what it won't change is the human interaction. And from the financial advisory side, yes, it can give you a lot of basic advice, but so can blog posts. I mean, I could go to a blog post there. I know personally like 150 financial bloggers that are really smart people. You can just go to their website and get all the financial advice you want. If you want somebody to give you personalized financial advice, computer can't do that. But if you want somebody to just answer a question for you, it can do that. You can go use Google and find the answer. That's not hard. So I think there's definitely going to be limitations to this until it becomes smarter than humans. So it's not just becoming equivalent; it has to become smarter than humans, and that is the challenge that is going to both scare a lot of people and maybe even slow down the process. Because I think it's kind of like saying that. If there were aliens, would you really want to know? Because now all of a sudden religion gets upended, philosophy gets up. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that get upended and people don't like change. So when this gets smarter than humans, that's going to be a big problem, if for nothing else than the establishment thinking of our society and how we view the world. We're going to have to rethink everything. In some ways, it's a good thing because change is good. But in other ways, it's going to cause problems and maybe even, a lot more I don't want to say violence, but a lot more hate and what have you. So we got to wrap it up here, Doug, in the interest of time. Thanks everybody for joining us. We got a lot of great questions. Try to answer as many as we can on the show. If there's some that we can't, we certainly will kind of add those to the next one. But Doug, where can people find more about you?
Well, thanks, Kirk. Yeah, today wasn't a sign. The technology still got some enhancement improvement to do before we're going to trust it to drive our cars with us sleeping in the front seat. I couldn't have had technology issues on a better day. Listen, coming into February, I think it's a good time to start thinking about those plans. I'm starting to get more people asking me about college and cost of college and wanting to make sure the kids are going to go to the right school. If they don't really know what this is what I hear. I don't know what I don't know. I know it's expensive. I don't want to overpay. I don't want stress. I don't have a lot of time to do this. This is 2,900 schools in this country. 85% of kids apply to the same 50 schools. Chances are you're probably doing that too, which means you're not going to get the discounts. You're going to overpay and probably not have the experience you're looking for. And it's a lot of stress and a lot of money to end up with an average outcome. Do it right. Do it up front, academically, financially, and socially. Find the right school for your child so that they can walk off stage on graduation in time and rocket into a career on Monday. So walk off on Friday, rocket into a career on Monday. Learn more, ProCollegePlanners.com. Reach out, download one of our free reports. Actually, you can download 2022, 2023 key data. There's been some new changes now about how you can use 529 money for your Roth IRA. Learn more about that. If you have any questions, reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thanks again for joining us. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.